Now to the big story that continues to make waves throughout the Middle East. President Trump suggesting the U.S. should take ownership of the Gaza Strip. The president suggested that the displaced Palestinians in Gaza be permanently resettled outside the war-torn territory and, well, renewed calls for Arab nations to take them in. Neighboring Jordan and Egypt have previously rejected those calls, urging that Palestinian people have a right to their land. Joining us now to discuss all of this is Mr. Harley Lippman, foreign policy expert back here on the Live Zone. Hey, Harley, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you as well. How are you?
I'm doing good as we approached Friday. In this case, a lot of people not thinking about Friday, thinking about, as you heard me say, what's currently taking place in Israel. Arab nations have rejected any suggestions to really displace Palestinians from Gaza. Meanwhile, opponents argue this would really amount to ethnic cleansing. I'm curious, Harley, your take on this proposal by President Trump.
I think the proposal is the only sane proposal that could deal with the conflict in the Middle East as it exists now. It's innovative, it's visionary, it's brilliant, and it's the only practical solution. So why do I say that? One is, has anybody come up with any other idea or any better solution? Not at all. That's what I would say to Trump with all his critics, is to say, well, give me a better idea. And when you look at Gaza now, it looks like the landscape of the moon, meaning virtually every building is destroyed. Whatever buildings are left are booby-trapped. That could take 10, 20, 30 years to finally get all the hidden bombs that Hamas has planted and all the rubble and in all the homes that are still standing. The bottom line is Gaza is inhospitable. No one can live there. You know, they say it's ethnic cleansing. So you mean it's better to have them live in unbelievable misery in a piece of land, Gaza, that has no sewage, no water, no electricity? So you think that's better? I think I'd ask the Palestinians in Gaza which is better. I think most would be happy to get an opportunity to leave and go to Egypt and Jordan.
Well, to your point,
Egypt and Jordan.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to make sure I played devil's advocate here, and that is to your point. You just made mention of Palestinians, but they in essence have rejected that idea, stating that to leave Gaza would be in essence a horrible thing in their words, and they are recalling the 1948 Exodus, which was when some 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or forced to flee their homes during Israel's creation. Your response to that?
Yeah, in 1947, 1948, it's important to point out, and please challenge me and play devil's advocate. The more you do it, the better. So at that time, the UN created two nations. They created one, they called it an Arab nation, because Arabs were living there. They did not call themselves Palestinians. Actually, Jews were called Palestinians. You know, we have the Jerusalem Post in Israel, one of the main newspapers. It was called the Palestinian Post, a Jewish newspaper. The Israeli Philharmonic was called the Palestinian Philharmonic. So if we want to look at the facts, Jews were called Palestinians. Arabs then moved into that area from Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab nations. There was a huge migration. So they moved there like many Jews did. The reason why I'm mentioning that is there was fighting among the groups between Arabs and Jews. So the UN put together a commission, 15 nations, among them a number of Muslim nations like Iran and Indonesia. And they came up with what sounds like a really reasonable idea. They said, let's create two nations for two people. Israel for the Jewish people, and they called it an Arab country because, again, Arabs were not identified as Palestinians, but Jews were. So they called it an Arab country. What was the reaction of the Arab world? The reaction was an exterminationist policy to commit genocide against the Jews and destroy the notion of a Jewish nation. So when you said that 700,000 Palestinians were displaced or forced out, let's examine that. One, a war breaks out. Now, Israel accepted two nations. The Arabs and the Palestinians did not. Even though they reject this peace plan, they're making a mistake like they've done historically. Almost all the big decisions that Palestinians have made have not served their interests, have actually worked against them. Like if they had accepted that in 1948, they would have had their own nation. The UN designated that, and Israel was okay with it. So they have to own up and take responsibility. It's like individual responsibility. They instead attacked Israel. 5 Arab armies attacked Israel, and they announced that the goal was to destroy Israel and finish what Hitler started. And this context is extremely important because there's a distorted view around the world. And you illustrate that when we say 700,000 Palestinians were forced out. Now let's quickly examine that. What happened to what we now call Palestinians living in areas that are now Israel? What happened to them? Well, one, when a war breaks out and you're a mother and you have daughters and you see the Syrian army coming to Israel to destroy it with thousands of 18-year-old boys, you're going to get out of the way. There's a war going on. So Palestinians, the majority, voluntarily left the war zone, as any family would probably do. Second, the Arab world told the local Arabs, leave. We're going to come in and kill the Jews. Get out of our way. And then the third displacement was partly due to Israel. And that was not designed to displace or get rid of Palestinians, but it was strategic and military. Meaning, a typical example was this. There's a village, and it's a Palestinian village, and the Syrian army is coming. And if we don't take that village, the Syrian army is going to have a big advantage over us. So Israeli soldiers would go to the village and say, you all have to leave because we need it for a military perspective. And that added to the displacement. But they were meant to leave temporarily.
Yeah.
So that's important to point out. But the big thing I want to say is even though the Arabs are rejecting it.
I got about a minute left, Harley. I'm listening.
I'm just saying, even though the Arabs are rejecting this today, visionaries are all about seeing things that others don't see. Look at Elon Musk. He said we could go to the moon, we could go to Mars. Everybody thought he was crazy. But yet he's now the richest man in the world. He's a visionary. He saw things that other people didn't see. This is what President Trump is seeing. It's all doable. It's all viable. And I think the Palestinians should be, frankly, grateful. They started an exterminationist war against Israel and failed. And there are consequences. And they're now given an opportunity to have a better life. I think it's the only sane solution that I've heard in resolving the conflict.
And we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Harley Lippman, foreign policy expert, kind enough to join us yet again on the Live Zone. Always good to see you, Harley, and truly appreciate your commentary.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.